I want a wall of separation between my personal assets and my business assets. And the way that I do that, I operate my business through a limited liability company. The biggest mistake that I see folks make is not taking their business seriously enough from the start. They're very much in entrepreneurial circles is this notion that we need to move fast and break things, that we need to hustle harder, that we need to just, get the product out to market, and then we'll figure out all the legal stuff later. By doing a little bit of diligence early on and working with somebody that can kind of help shape brand strategy, not from a marketing perspective, but from a global footprint, are you going to be safe to use this perspective? Making that sort of investment and working with someone who's able to do that, it's just going to save you headaches later on.
Launching a business isn't easy, but protecting it can be. Our guest today, Wright, is an e-commerce and online businesses attorney who is an expert in helping entrepreneurs protect their personal assets, bulletproof their brand, and weaponize their work of authorship. We covered a lot of interesting and very important topics today, such as what are the common legal mistakes you might be doing in your store, in your ads, in your copywriting, in your emails, how to build your business with the exit sale in mind, the difference between trademarks, copyrights, patents, etc., and much, much more.
Welcome to the EcomXFactor podcast, where it's all about launching and scaling your business using sales funnels, automations, and smart marketing. And now, please welcome your host, the founder of EcomXFactor, Yaron Bin.
Hi, Robert. How are you?
Doing great. How's it going?
I'm great. Excited. I think this has been the longest pre-podcast talk I've ever had. And I enjoyed it a lot. So I'm looking forward.
It had nothing to do with legal or business. It was just,
Exactly.
We just kind of started talking, which is cool.
You also shared a bit of what you're planning to share during this episode. And I think it's very valuable. I also have personal questions because I'm sure that I'm doing things wrong in regards to legal stuff. So before we dive into things, so can you share a bit about your background story and what you do these days?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you asking the question. I mean, so I'm a lawyer by trade. My name is Robert Wright. I opened up I've never had a physical brick and mortar law practice. When I launched and hung my shingle, I decided I wanted to do things differently. We were talking, before we hit the record button about how very much there's a huge educational component to what I do. Like I feel very passionate about making sure that people are educated about the law, that they understand it, whether there's a service or an offering attached to it or not. That's important to me that entrepreneurs in particular are educated. I wanted to create a space where people could do that. So I didn't want the, fancy downtown law firm. I didn't want the secretary. I didn't need the big fancy couch that people sat on. I wanted people to be able to access legal education, to be able to access legal services in a way that was affordable, a way that was effective to folks, right? So hung my shingle virtually. It was the first virtual law practice in Kentucky. I can certainly tell you that. I don't know that we have another one. I'm sure somebody out there is floating around with a computer saying they have a virtual law office or not, but I was one of the first. I'm really proud of that because I've always been a little bit of a geek. And so, taking law and taking technology, kind of splicing it together to get out in front of people has always been really, really powerful and meaningful to me. I got interested in law about the time that Napster was really coming into being. It was a thing, right? I was on a college campus during the heyday of Napster. And I will tell you, there was never a better time to be on a college campus when, you had a big fat T1 line and, fast internet, which was not a thing at that point. People had dial up or they didn't have internet at all. I had a T1 line and you could share music with your friends. And who doesn't want to share, right? That's what they teach you day one at kindergarten, that you should share with your friends. And so it was on a college campus when all of this, the internet was really becoming what it's become, right? File sharing and movie sharing and connecting. And that all got shut down. And it got shut down fast and furiously, by Metallica. Yeah. They were the faces of it, the rally against the machine, these angry, metalheads. Now they're all corporate. They all want the dollar. And I was frankly pretty upset about that. I didn't get it, right? And I thought, wait a minute. Literally, the thing they teach you day one at kindergarten that you should share, right? And I've been doing my part. I love music. I love movies. I mean, I go and I buy the albums and they're horrible. Like there's one good song and the rest are just junk. And what's so wrong with waking up in the morning and saying, oh man, I remember that song. It's a great song. I should add that to my collection, and being able to do that. That just didn't seem wrong to me. And so I headed into law school really wanting to understand that. And I quit, so I started digging into it. I realized, okay, what we're talking about is intellectual property law. That's copyrights, that's trademarks, that's patents, that's trade secrets, each one being its own kind of treasure chest of just interesting knowledge and insight. And as I explored copyright, I soon realized that's not sharing, it's stealing. And, artists, there is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into producing that crappy song on the album, albeit a crappy song. They still worked hard on it. And, they need to be able to recoup, monies for their efforts. And so really kind of switched my perspective on that and realized, yeah, it's not sharing, it's stealing. That's not okay. That's not right. Now, I will say, I don't think the recording industry of America, as they kind of went around and just started suing everybody, taking names and asking questions later. I don't think that was the right approach. Certainly the Motion Picture Association of America did things differently. I think a little bit smarter in terms of embracing technology, embracing the internet, and still being able to distribute good, solid content to people. So that's been interesting to kind of watch and change over the course of years. But really, that's what the whole Napster thing got me interested in intellectual property. It was it connected technology, which I was already a little bit of a geek about anyway, and the law, which I've always had a passion for and loved. And so as I launched, I had the privilege and pleasure of being able to practice the type of law I wanted to practice. A lot of people don't get that ability. They graduate law school, whatever firm gave them a job, they just kind of end up doing. Maybe they do workers' compensation law or criminal law, or they end up doing whatever because that's what they had to. Yeah. I wanted to do something differently. And I said, I want to support entrepreneurs because they're underserved. I want to support folks that, they have a lot of needs, but they don't have a big budget. They don't have the money to go down to hire a $700 an hour patent attorney or a $600 an hour trademark attorney. They don't have that, but they have patent needs. They have trademark needs. They have copyright needs. So how do I make those sorts of resources accessible to folks with that need in a way that they can afford, right? And so you strip away brick and mortar, you strip away fancy couches, you strip away staff that you don't need, and you leverage the power of the internet. I've been able to do that. Now, here in recent days, that was kind of, I launched with just kind of a general, I'm going to help entrepreneurs, right? I'm going to help them form businesses. I'm going to help them register trademarks. I'm going to help them with copyright related issues. Maybe there's some contract stuff that they need. And certainly that went well and that went fine. But when my practice really started to take off was when I niched down and I said, I want to help people who sell physical products online. Certainly Amazon's a big aspect of that, but whether it's a Shopify store, WooCommerce, your own platform, whatever it would be, people who are taking products that, they're either private labeling and bringing to market, maybe they're doing some wholesale, maybe they're distributing other brands, but they're selling physical things online and all the legalities of doing that. They kind of neatly fall into a couple of different buckets. Those same buckets that I was already providing, right? Forming a business, coming up with a brand name, or if you've been given a brand name, maybe you're licensing from someone. Okay, well, what are your rights? What are you able to do with that brand name? How are you able to use it? If you're selling products online, you're taking, product photos. And so that's copyright all day, every day. And then there's inevitably just weird things that bubble up when you sell online. There's account suspensions, there's cease and desist letters. There's just, maybe somebody left a nasty negative review. What do you do with that when it's completely false or misleading? That's as I really just kind of, again, niched down and said, these are my people. These are the folks that I'm going to support. Things have gotten really interesting really fast. And I've never looked back. And frankly, I've never had more fun. I mean, I have seen some of the strangest products that people have ever brought to market. I've seen some of the most mundane, boring, you're like, oh, well, everybody's selling that. I don't know that anyone's going to buy yours. And everything in between. It has been, I count myself as very blessed to be able to do work that I enjoy, work that I love. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of folks in the legal profession these days that can really say that. In fact, a lot of my classmates, they've gotten burnt out with the practice. They've gotten burnt out with law. They're off doing other things now because it's just not for them. And they look at me and I'm kind of like, I'm helping, some client in Australia sell their Amazon business. I'm helping somebody in Texas just get started. I'm helping somebody, over in the UK that's, trying to get an account up and running. I mean, it's strange work when you describe it to other people, but it's certainly needed work and it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Nice. Amazing. I already have so many questions, but before we begin, I want maybe to clarify, this might come out as ignorant, but I'm not sure what is a trading secret. So can you clarify what is a trading secret?
No, it's a great question because it's kind of the black sheep of the intellectual property family. So typically, most folks are aware of copyrights, which protect works of authorship, trademarks, which protect brand names, logos, and slogans, right? Patents, which protect either the design or utility of an item. The trade secret is that we don't talk about it a lot because we're not supposed to talk about it a lot. It's that way of doing business. It's that secret sauce that you put under lock and key, you hide in a black box, and you never really share. Good examples would be things like the formula for Coca-Cola is practiced as a trade secret. The recipe for Bush's baked beans is practiced as a trade secret. Typically, it's kind of recipes, it's methods of doing business, how things operate. And the really interesting thing about trade secrets, and one of the reasons why I think they shouldn't be undervalued as you think about, well, how do I protect my intellectual property catalog, right? Patents have a life expectancy, right? 15 or 20 years, and then they go, they're public domain, they're available. Copyrights, life of the author plus 70 years. It's a very long lifespan, but it's a lifespan nonetheless, right? Trademarks, okay, as long as you're using them, you have rights in them, which is great. But if you stop using them, they go away. Trade secrets, so long as you work to protect them, so long as you go the extra mile to make sure that they are under lock and key, that they're in that black box, that people have limited access to them, they can presumably go on forever. Coca-Cola has been around for a good long time. Bush's baked beans, the same. I mean, there's a lot of effort that goes into having to maintain the secrecy of that. But if you're able to do it and you're able to do it successfully, you have protectable intellectual property that you can defend and protect, presumably forever, which is really, really great. For most folks selling online, you're not going to have a lot of trade secret possibilities, but you certainly may have some. It might be that you have a special methodology that you use for sourcing products. It might be that you have a certain way that you go about evaluating a potential supplier. You're not going to have a recipe per se, like in terms of, food or soda, but you could have a recipe in terms of how you go about doing a certain process in your business that might be worthy of protecting as a trade secret. Business methodologies are certainly patentable. The problem is when you patent something, you make a deal with the devil in some respects, right? You have to tell everybody exactly how you do what you do in exchange for that 20 year, that 15 years of monopoly. So you have that short, length of time to be able to go and exploit it and commercialize it. And once it's done, it's done. Some types of things like technology, 15, 20 years is certainly more than enough time, to be able to really exploit that. I mean, I can't imagine having like a 15, 20-year-old iPhone at this point. That'd be like the worst phone in the world. But a lot of things in business, they don't have an expiration date, right? And so again, methodologies, ways about doing things, think about recipes, not in terms of food per se, but recipes in terms of way that you do business, possibly trade secretable.
Is there a directory which I can look at other recipes?
They're all secret.
They're all secret, but maybe like recipes that already expired, for example.
The interesting thing, you never publish trade secrets. They generally, they kind of leak out. So interestingly with fried chicken, I'll give you a local example here. The Colonel has his secret blends of herbs and spices. It's a big thing. Yum Brands has gone to great lengths to make sure that is never, whatever the exact makeup of those herbs and spices is that it's never disclosed.
Mm-hmm.
There was an incident here recently. It was actually, recently, a couple of years ago, there was a relative, I think it was like a cousin of Colonel Sanders, who found an old book that had been passed down through the family, and he opens it up. He's just cleaning out the garage or whatever, and this piece of paper falls out, and it has paprika and garlic and salt and pepper, just ingredients that would make sense to be in the KFC recipe. And it had certain, measurements associated with it. Well, this particular individual, word got out because it was a small town in Kentucky, and it got published in the newspaper. And there was a big fuss about, putting that cow back in the barn, as it were. Is that the recipe? Is that not the recipe? If it is the recipe, once it's out and it's public domain, it is. You can't have a secret if everybody knows about it. And so that's one of the rubs of the trade secret is you have to keep it under lock and key. And if it gets out, it gets out. And if you're not able to put the cow back in the barn, as it were, your trade secret's gone. And everybody could make, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Everybody could make Coca-Cola. Everybody could make Bush's Baked Beans. Again, there are trade secrets that aren't, food. I don't know why I'm on a food vibe today, but I just am. And because they're some of the most fun trade secrets that we have, but no published catalog. Just Google the internet and see if you can find it. And maybe you strike gold, maybe you don't. Remains to be seen. You have to report back to all the folks on the podcast if you found any good recipes out there.
Maybe I'll develop a system, but it's going to be a trade secret.
There you go.
It's going to be a trade secret.
You can trade secret now.
Exactly. Okay, so there is already a lot of stuff I want to cover, but maybe we can start with common mistakes that you see among entrepreneurs, because I'm sure that me and the other listeners are going to fall under some aspects of these mistakes. So might as well just share them.
No, absolutely. So I think the biggest mistake that I see folks make is not taking their business seriously enough from the start. They're very much in entrepreneurial circles is this notion that we need to move fast and break things, that we need to hustle harder, that we need to just, get the product out to market, and then we'll figure out all the legal stuff later. And actually, I think there's some degree of truth in that. I've seen people that they're either on two ends of the spectrum. They're either like, well, we'll figure out all the legal business stuff later. We've just got to get product or service to market and, literally move fast and break things.
Mm-hmm.
That's great if you're Facebook and you have the resources to be able to piece things back together when they do break. But, most entrepreneurs aren't, they don't have those resources available to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of the spectrum is people who say they want to do business. And they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. They want to formalize everything to an inch of its life before they ever actually get to market, right? They have this embedded fear of failure, but they feel like they're making progress on their business because, I'm working on the incorporation documents, or I've got to get the contract perfect, or I've got to get the terms of service ready to go, or we need a better privacy policy. And they are making, purposeful efforts in their business, but they're actually not really running a business. They're just building something, right? So there's these two extremes of just, to hell with the legal stuff. And, we need to be, we can't take on any risk at all. I think the answer is right in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you go to market, whether it's with a physical product, you have a service, as you get out there, you're doing business. If you do business without any sort of business entity, right? You're not running through a limited liability company. You're not operating through a corporation, or maybe it's a UK limited company, or maybe it's something else, right? A formal, proper business structure. You are the business and the business is you, meaning that if that product injures somebody, or that service doesn't turn out the way that everybody expected it to turn out, they're coming after you. They're coming after your bank account, your house, your car, your funds, you're this, you're that. You are the business and the business is you. There's no separation there. I sell physical products online because I think it's a great business model, right? I want to make sure that when I do, certainly I make sure that the products I sell, naturally, the very nature of them, not very risky, that, they don't have electrical components, they don't require batteries, they don't have moving parts, they're not going to explode or blow up, or there's no sharp edges or blunt edges. I just naturally, the types of products that I choose mitigate risk just by their very nature.
Yeah.
If you sell a speaker bracket, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the speaker might fall.
Yeah.
Okay. We can't protect against that. Sometimes brackets fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like I'm selling a knife. And, some kid took the knife out of the package and ran around and started slashing things, right? Like that's dangerous. Even so, I want a wall of separation between my personal assets and my business assets. And the way that I do that, I operate my business through a limited liability company. It's one of the easiest entities to spin up. It is one of the easiest to operate. It has, if you want to avail yourself of corporate taxation, you can do that. If you just want to keep things simple, stupid, you can just be a disregarded entity and profits and losses will just flow down to you individually. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I have a wall of protection between my personal stuff and my business stuff. And so, I encourage folks early days, if you're really serious about doing business, if you're going to spin up a Shopify store, if you're going to spin up WooCommerce, if you're going to go over to Amazon, you're going to go sell on eBay, you're going to set up at a flea market, right? And sell products to people, spin up a business entity, keep your personal stuff off the field of play, only ever have your business assets at risk. Number one, you're just going to be more professional when you present yourself as a corporate entity of some sort. But then more importantly, number two, the only assets that you're ever going to have at risk are the business assets. Simple, easy to do. I see a lot of entrepreneurs not do it because we got to fail fast. We've got to, move fast and break things. We just got to hustle and grind. And they ignore the legal stuff because it's going to slow them down. It doesn't take all that long to form a proper business entity. It takes much longer to deal with the mess that you have to clean up from not doing so than just spending a little bit of time up front to just get a business spun up and start operating through that. So that's mistake number one for sure. It's just not having a proper business structure to operate through.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. And I think that it depends on your risk aversion. But for me, we structured a company pretty fast. And now we also opened a UK entity. But what can go wrong? Let's say for people that are not yet convinced and they say, okay, I'm selling the speaker bracket. What can go wrong? So can you share some examples of what can go wrong?
Great example. So I just told you, and I'll double down on it. Speaker bracket, because I guess someone could bludgeon someone with a speaker bracket, but I don't know that there's going to be really any liability attached to you for that. But let's say the brand name that you choose for the speaker bracket, you just throw anybody's brand name on there. You didn't really check or anything. Well, guess what? Now the next thing you know, you're getting a letter being accused of trademark infringement. Trademark infringement has some significant liabilities associated with it. So while the speaker bracket itself may not have created any liabilities, maybe the brand name that you chose to put on it, maybe the brand name of the store that you're using to sell it, it infringes somebody else's trademark. And all of a sudden you're pulled into a lawsuit where you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of damages. Well, if you're not operating through a proper business vehicle, those damages, whatever they are, whether they're tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, that's coming out of your bank account. That's going to be, let's put a lien on your house. Let's put a lien on your car. Let's tap into your retirement funds. Again, I don't like black clouds hanging over my business. I don't want it. That stuff keeps me up at night. What doesn't keep me up at night is to understand my business as a business bank account with X number of dollars in it. My business as an insurance policy to handle sorts of things like that. And that if, God forbid, something like I ever made the mistake of infringing a trademark or infringing a copyright or violating someone's patent, okay, I have a fixed amount of assets that I know are ever at play. I'm still going to have a house where I can lay in my bed at night. I'm still going to have a table where I can feed my family. I'm still going to have a car to be able to drive around and do whatever I do driving around in my car. Like, I'm going to be good. I've got that sorted. That's taken care of. That's set aside. I see people, and as I'm talking about this, people are probably like, well, wait a minute. Like, how likely is it that I would do that? I've seen a number of people, because they don't understand patent, they will go and they'll research a product online and they're like, oh, everybody's selling this product. I'm going to go source it. I'm going to go to Alibaba and find something that looks similar. I'm going to find a wholesaler or a distributor that I can just buy here. I can make it myself and sell it on Etsy. It's so simple. It's so interesting. Everybody else is doing it. I'm sure it's fine. I mean, I've had clients that have been pulled into class action lawsuits because they sold a product that everybody else was selling. And, their business was basically crippled before they could even get started. I mean, thank goodness they had that wall of protection before they actually went out and started doing business, because the product that they chose to get to market, it was novel, it was unique, it was non-obvious, it was different. They didn't do a patent search.
Yeah.
Everybody else was doing it, so I'm sure it's okay, right? But
Yeah.
guess what? If there is a product that's special, and that speaker bracket has a special way that it attaches to the wall. That speaker bracket, it's got a unique design aspect to it. That speaker bracket, it's a little bit different. It's better, even though it's a speaker bracket. And you're like, that's no big deal. It's dumb, boring, does what it says on the tin. If there's any sort of special to it, I promise you, somebody out there has rights to that special, and they protect those rights through a patent. And if somebody is invested in a patent, they're pretty keen to make sure that they get a return on that investment. And so all the other people who go to the marketplace with that special, right, guess what? They're coming after you, right? And when they come after you, again, what I want to make sure that is at risk, that it's ever at risk, are the business assets, not my personal assets, right? And that's why I think forming a company, especially early days, is one of the smartest things that you can possibly do. Everything that happens after that, who knows how your business is going to go, right? That's the nature of business, right? You're not guaranteed success, right? There's certain things that you can do to be successful, but one of the things that you can do to limit your risk is to make sure that that wall exists such that, again, your house is protected, your bank account's protected, your car, all the physical things that you have as an individual are protected, and only ever are your business assets at risk.
This is totally clear, and I totally agree. Okay, I formed a company. What now? Can I do whatever I want? I guess I can. So what do you suggest doing?
Kind of depends upon the nature of your business, right? So if you're doing first and foremost, I think it's important if you're doing any sort of branding. So you're selling private label, maybe you're spinning up a website, you want to choose, kind of some branding for the website. I think it's important to make sure that the brand name you're choosing functions as a trademark and it's available. One of the things that I've seen, entrepreneurs do is not do any sort of what's called a trademark clearance. Again, making sure that the mark functions as a trademark and is available. They'll choose a name, they'll slap it on their store, they'll slap it on their product, they'll get to market. Things will start to go well. They'll start to build some momentum in their business. And then a dreaded cease and desist letter comes, or a dreaded, if they're selling on a platform like Amazon, someone complains and their listing shut down. Brand names are one of those things where people just don't think a lot about them. They just, okay, it's just the domain name was available. I'm sure it's fine, right? I got the .com, I'm okay. It's not, that's a good indicator, but we need to do a little bit more, especially if we're selling physical products. Again, whether it's through a platform like Amazon or whether it's through your own store with WooCommerce, Shopify, or some other platform. You can do so by going to uspto.gov. It's a free, publicly available website. You can plug in your brand name and see if there are names that are the exact same. If there are, my guidance would be to maybe rethink your brand name. Doesn't mean that you can't use it. It just means that the analysis is a little bit more nuanced. Or if you find names that are similar, you might want to gravitate, away and choose a different brand name. The best brand name, whether it's for a business or a product, is one that's invented. Right? Invented brand names have the absolute strongest trademark protection possible. Brand names that are more descriptive of the product or the service, their level of protection is pretty low. In fact, if you ever wanted to go and register your brand name as a formal trademark, you'd have to actually prove consumer goodwill. You'd actually have to prove that people, despite the fact that on its face, the brand name doesn't work as a trademark, people know it's a trademark. You have to actually go, the more descriptive your brand name is, the more work you have to put into actually proving that it's a brand name. So when I work with clients, one of the things I'll do early days is say, okay, well, what kind of brand name do we want to come up with? Let's invent something. Let's come up with something that sounds like a brand name. It sounds like a term, like it means something, but it's really gobbledygook. It's nonsense. It doesn't mean anything at all, because that type of brand name is going to be the absolute strongest you can possibly have. And those sorts of names that are invented, they work great for physical products. If you had a branding expert on, I'm sure they'd say, well, wait a minute, the branding really needs to speak to the customer avatar, and it needs to make them feel about, a certain experience, and it, give them a warm fuzzy in their heart. And all of that is true from a branding perspective. But from a physical products perspective, again, certainly on Amazon, people just want to be brand registered because of the benefits that you get, the better listings, the additional advertising opportunities, the brand enforcement. You need to check two boxes. Does it function as a trademark, meaning it's an invented term? And is it available, right? And going ahead and going to uspto.gov, doing a cursory search, getting an actual search firm to do a more formal global clearance. So most of my clientele, they're selling globally, right? So we can't just look at the United States. Trademarks are geographic in scope. And so if I have a client that says, listen, I'm going to sell in the US and in Canada and the UK, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Poland, Benelux, Australia, I want to sell everywhere. I might not be in market in all those places from day one, but I know I'm headed there. One of the things that I'll do in terms of the search is I'll go and I'll look globally and I'll say, okay, in all of these markets, number one, is this brand name you want to choose, has someone already taken it? Or has someone taken something that's confusingly similar? And if so, we're able to stop and course correct and say, hey, listen, this looks like a really good brand name, but in the German market, it looks like you're not going to be able to use it because somebody else has a similar name, right? By doing a little bit of diligence early on and working with somebody that can kind of help shape brand strategy, not from a marketing perspective, but from a global footprint, are you going to be safe to use this perspective? Making that sort of investment and working with someone who's able to do that, it's just going to save you headaches later on. Because what I'd hate to do, or what I'd hate to see, is have someone launch a product, it goes gangbusters, sells really well in the States. Let's go to Europe. We need to get this thing in Europe because it's gonna be 30-40% of my gross revenue per year. And then you find out somebody in Europe's already taken a name that's similar. Now you've got the exercise of, now I've got one product, but I've got a European brand name and I've got a US brand name. It's a schizophrenic sort of brand scenario that could have been headed off with a little bit of diligence early days.
You touched upon one of my next questions. So you mentioned the US resource for getting the trademarks, and then you said you gave some advice regarding like global laws. And something that I think about a lot is global contracts. What is their importance? And if I do a contract with my Alibaba supplier, will he respect it? Is there any point in doing a contract?
The answer is you can. Now, different countries are different in terms of how contracts, what you need to do to make a contract enforceable. So for example, in China, it's not just a simple signature, it's a signature and a stamp, right? It's got to be translated to Mandarin and the US. I mean, there's certain things that you need to do to make a contract more enforceable in China than, outside of it. Okay. What I would tell you, just some kind of general principles, every contract that you do has a choice of law provision, or it should have a choice of law provision, where you can basically say, listen, everybody to this contract agrees that the law of the United States is going to apply to the interpretation of this contract, or the law of the United Kingdom is going to apply to the interpretation of this contract. So you can do that. That in its just in its essence kind of shifts, okay, if I'm in the US, I want US law to apply if there's ever a dispute over this contract. Or if I'm in the UK, want the UK, law to govern interpretation of this agreement. So you can kind of shift what law are we using to look at this, right, on its face. Secondly, the question becomes one of enforceability, right? So yeah, I absolutely think that you should have, I think there's different, let's use Alibaba, for example. There's different levels of relationship that you have with your supplier. There are some suppliers that are just going to be very transactional in terms of every once in a while, you buy a little bit of stock from them and a purchase order with, maybe you put some special terms and conditions on it. Maybe that's going to do it for you, right? But maybe you have a more special relationship. Maybe you have a more strategic relationship with a supplier. Maybe they have created a mold for you. Maybe they have, maybe they've agreed to some degree of exclusivity, right? Once you start to kind of move away from the more tactical, one-off, transactional sorts of relationships to the, wow, I'm really dependent upon these folks. And wow, they've done some unique special things for me, whether it's with the product or maybe it's with the packaging or maybe it's, something else. That's when you really get into the realm of, I need a special agreement. I need a mold agreement created. I need an exclusive supply agreement created. And you need somebody that both from whatever country you're coming from, whether it's UK, US, elsewhere, but also, eyes on it from a Chinese perspective to say, okay, Let's make sure number one, we have an enforceable contract.
Uh-huh.
Number two, we understand what law applies. But then number three, what's our plan for enforcing this, right? Mm-hmm. I think one of the really interesting things that's kind of bubbled up that I'm particularly fascinated by are a lot of online arbitration sites.
Quick favor, guys. If you enjoy these shows and have been a listener for quite some time now, we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your preferred podcast app may be. Having lots of ratings and audience feedback makes our show become more visible across multiple platforms. And it also supports our mission of helping as many people as possible to become better marketers and better entrepreneurs. So if you're not driving and it wouldn't be dangerous, pause this thing right now and give us an honest review over your podcast app. And we will love you even more than we already do. Thank you for taking the time, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
Because as we become more connected via the internet, we're doing more business digitally. We're not physically in a location. I don't know that I can't recall just off the, my book of business outside of law or even, clients. I don't know. There's a handful that might have that are U.S. based that have a U.S. based supplier. Most have suppliers that are, hundreds and thousands of miles physically away from where they are, right? To bridge that gap, understanding that the likelihood of me flying to China or me employing a Chinese law firm to litigate a matter in China is pretty low, right? That's practically, it would really have to be a big deal for me to make that investment. Understanding that there's a number of kind of resources that are propping up that almost have these online kind of mediation or online arbitration panels where you can contractually in the agreement say, listen, if there's a dispute under this contract that's under $25,000, something that no one's flying around hiring lawyers or going to court over, but still it's big enough that we're going to call in our rights under the agreement. There's some platforms that are springing up. It's actually on my kind of roadmap to create one where, parties can go and have the issue arbitrated and a decision rendered and a judgment enforced. There's a sweet spot in the law between big law firms and kind of do it yourself online, click the form and do it on your own. With a virtual law practice, I think there's a really interesting sweet spot between going to court and then, oh man, it's going to be too expensive to go to court. I can't do anything. There's a nice sweet spot that I think technology can solve. And so again, it's not on the immediate roadmap, but on the roadmap is I would love to have a platform that allows for arbitration of disputes like that in a fair, reasonable way, such that when people are wronged, they don't have to, it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg to go and enforce their rights under the contract. So I would say, contracts, you need one. There's very much a place for them in the e-com space. But I think the more sophisticated conversation is, okay, once you have it, what are you going to do with it? Right? The best contract always has a remedy. So if you're just doing a standard purchase with a supplier, hey, Mr. Supplier, you're going to represent and warrant that these products are going to be of a certain quality. And you could just leave it at that. But I think the better contract says, and if they're not, the remedy is going to be that, I'm reimbursed or I'm credited or, for whatever units don't meet that standard. Contracts without remedies are naked contracts. They really, really are. So as we go out and do them, number one, e-commerce folks need them. We're so lazy with contracts because we're just handshake deal or there's an email back and forth. There's nothing wrong with having some contractual provisions, some standard terms and conditions under which you can do business. But the better play is having those terms and conditions which have enforceable, realistic, practical remedies that you can point to say, hey, the product showed up and it was defective. The remedy, as you agreed to, was we get a credit, and the credit's going to be on the books for the next order, or we're going to be issued a refund, and that refund's going to be issued via wire within 5 business days of me telling you about this, or whatever it is. Right? That's the cool thing about contracts. They're blank canvases. You can use a template, but really they need to, you can put brush to canvas and create any sort of construct or terms you want, so long as everybody agrees to it. But again, that the creative aspect of things, building remedies into those terms really separates people who are doing it and doing it well versus everybody else.
The solution that you mentioned sounds like an amazing solution and makes a lot of sense. Is it different from escrow services?
It is. I mean, escrow certainly has its place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Escrow is just kind of the monies are sitting in an account. If everything goes well, then the funds are released. Certainly in Alibaba, trade assurance and the like, and escrow, good things. And they have their place. The solution that I'm kind of talking about is the business is already done, right? Yeah. Monies have exchanged hands, goods have been received. Maybe we moved them into our store, we moved them into Amazon or whatever. But you know what? All of a sudden, we're getting a lot of feedback that these things, they aren't working. They're showing up broken, despite we had we did all the things we were supposed to do, right? We got a sample, we had an inspection, we checked the car. I mean, we did everything, but for whatever reason, something just got missed. Okay, now we got to call that in. And that's hard to do. I mean, once money has exchanged hands, that gets tough, right? Because you lose leverage. And so what you do want is really clear terms, a really solid contract to be able to point to say, hey, listen, I know I've already paid you for this, but here's what we said, and here's what we said would be done, right? And you have to rely upon the ongoing business relationship. And in the event that you're unable to do that, maybe the other side's responsive, well, great. There's a formal mechanism, there's a formal procedure that's not going to court, but it's going to an online panel to be able to say, okay, listen, here's what happened. Here's what the contract says, Mr. Arbitration person. If the other person doesn't show up, well, great. Then they're going to lose. And then you're going to have a judgment. And then you have options. If you have a judgment, you have options. You have things that you can do to enforce your rights judicially. The practical considerations are, will you? Depends. But certainly, at the end of the day, I would rather have a piece of paper to be able to point to and say, hey, you said you would do this, than not. I would rather have a judgment to say, hey, the panel said you really hosed us, right? You didn't honor your terms, and I want to do something with this, than not. I think all too often entrepreneurs are just a little brazen and just it doesn't matter anyway, so I don't need to do it. I would rather have options than not have options in my business. I
want to cover two more. I have a lot of questions in mind already. I'm not sure that we'll be able to cover everything in this call, but two more, at least two more subjects that are very important, and I think they are overlooked, and we can call this episode maybe e-commerce legal 101.
I like it.
Probably people overlook policies, and people steal a lot of advertising materials, images, videos, stuff like that. So can you speak about these two topics?
Let's start with the kind of the copy and paste nature of the internet. It kind of goes back, full circle to the whole Napster discussion that we had earlier in the podcast. We have grown up in a culture where if something is visible, it's available on the internet, you can search Google Images and find it. You're not making money off of it, so I can just copy and paste it and put it on my website, or I can put it in my brochure, or I can use it on my advertising, or I can do whatever with it because it's on the internet. I can just copy and paste it. I didn't hurt anybody. That's not how copyright law works, right? Without permission, copyright vests with the author. So whoever took that photo, right, is the author. Right. And this is actually one of the big mistakes that people will make in their business. Maybe they're not copying and pasting something off Google Images or the internet. Maybe they've hired somebody to take some product photos. Maybe they've hired somebody to create some sales copy. Maybe they've hired somebody to create some packaging design, or just some other assets of their business. They think they own it. They think they own those photos. They think they own the sales copy. They think they own the packaging design. They don't. They don't. That's not how the law works. Copyright vests with the author, that person, that photographer who pushes the button on the camera, that person who put fingers to keyboard to write the sales copy, that designer who put brush to canvas to create the packaging. They're the author. And copyright, they might give you the JPEGs. They might give you the PDFs. They might give you the AI files. You own those. You do not own the underlying copyright unless you have the right agreement in place with them. That is one of the biggest misconceptions of the law, because it feels like you own it, right? You hired that photographer, they gave you the photos, you handed them money. It feels like a like kind exchange. It's not. Copyright vests with the author. Copyright law is so protective of authors. They naturally leave the copyright with the author. So we have to have an agreement in place called a work for hire agreement. It could be a copyright assignment agreement, but we need special terms to make sure whoever's generating those assets, those photos, sales copy, ad copy, packaging designs, any sort of written, graphical, visual sort of asset in our business, make sure you have a copyright assignment agreement or a work for hire agreement in place that transfers copyright to you. Then you have options. Then you can choose to register the copyright or not register the copyright. There's certainly reasons too, but maybe you decide not to. But again, you've got options, right? But you can't do that without the agreement. So number one, people who are creating in our business, we need a contract and we need the right verbiage in there to make sure that copyright is transferred to us. Number one. Number two, for those assets where we go and we find them on the internet, maybe it's through like a stock photography company. Scroll down, even those free sites where it's like free stock photos. Okay, well, what are the terms? Can you use them for commercial purposes or does it have to be used for non-commercial purposes? There's a difference, right? Mm-hmm. Copyright effectively gives you a bundle of rights. You can distribute those sticks in that bundle however you like. So someone who owns those free stock photos and that person, the copyright owner can say, hey, I'm going to give them a stick to use these for non-commercial purposes, but they're going to hold back the stick that allows for commercial purposes. So you might have to pay a fee. So when you go to these free repositories, whether it's music for podcasts, whether it's, or videos, I had an intro done for as I do streams. I've got a little intro, it was created and I was searching through free, kind of jingle music or whatever. And I mean, I'm very careful to make sure, okay, what are the terms of service? What are they allowed to do? Do I have the right rights? What am I going to use this work for? That's the analysis that we have to go through, right? Whether whatever the asset is, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate rights. If you're finding something on the internet, whether it's somebody else's product detail page or just a Google search or Google Images or wherever it is, do not copy and paste. There are very few resources on the internet that are just copy and paste friendly, right? Even though technology allows you to do it, there are very few places that lawfully allow you to do that. And when you do find a place, scroll down to the bottom of the page, look at those policies, look at those terms and conditions, and really understand, what do I have the rights to do here? What do I have the rights to do here? You'll find this on Fiverr a good bit. People who go over there and they want to pay $10 for a logo or $15 for a intro video, or there's all sorts of random stuff on Fiverr. It's great. Understand what you're buying, right? Fiverr's terms of service are actually pretty interesting. If you scroll down and read them, if you're having trouble sleeping one night, you can give them a read. The folks over at Fiverr understand copyright law quite well. And so they actually flip everything that I've said on its head. In their terms of service, they actually say, listen, unless the person providing this gig specifically says that you don't own the copyright, you do. So good on Fiverr for building that into their terms. But also we have to be very, very particular and very purposeful as we do work on a platform like Fiverr to understand, okay, what do the native terms say? Because that's my contract that I just talked about. But then also, what are the specifics of this particular gig? Right? Did they say, listen, for commercial purposes, I have to pay an extra $5? That's a license right. That's a bundle of rights, a stick that's been granted or reserved, right? We've got to be mindful of that. We've got to be aware that not every use is the same use. There are commercial uses and there are non-commercial uses, and it makes a difference. And what we don't want to do is get caught up. We get our product to market. We got a great store up and running. Things are, going swimmingly. And then somebody just to, because, again, I have, when you make profit, you're ringing a bell, right? And people are watching you and they know there's blood in the water, right? And they're coming after you. Yeah. Your competitors are coming after you. The platform might come after you. Your suppliers are going to notice what you're doing and say, well, this guy's selling a lot of spatulas, man. I'm going to start selling spatulas too, right? Your customers are going to come after you and start, wanting to try to get free. Well, this showed up and the spatula was a little bit chipped. Can you send me another one? There is blood in the water when you start making money. And I guarantee you, people have created assets. I've seen this a number of times, and I've seen it when people are selling their businesses. That's the absolute, if people haven't come out of the woodwork until then, they will come out when you sell your business. And they're, you've got to go around and kind of, one of the questions that people who are buying businesses is, well, where'd these photos come from? And who created this logo? And that's really nice retail packaging. Who created that? You got to fess up. It's confession. You got to make a list. Well, I got the guy on Fiverr did it. The guy on Upwork did it. I had somebody down the street take the product photos. All the kids in the photos that are hanging out in the backyard with the product. Yeah, that was my old neighbor. You gotta track those people down, and you've got to get rights. Well, guess what? I mean, I had a client who was about to sell their business for Wright at like $1.7 million. Nice sale. It was going to be life-changing wealth for this particular individual.
Mm-hmm.
And their business the sale was almost held up by somebody. We were literally tracking some guy down off of Upwork from like 8 years ago.
Wow.
And I mean, think about that. You're just like, the difference between life-changing wealth and just where you are today is dependent upon some guy on Upwork from, almost a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
I hope he's alive.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we can find him. I hope he's willing to sign the thing. Like, it all happened and all the planets aligned and we were able to make it happen. But it was really eye-opening to me. And so as I work with folks, I want to avoid all of that, right? Mm-hmm. And the cool thing is, if you just understand how things work, if you understand, okay, great, I'm going to market and I don't want my personal assets to be at risk, form a business, right? I'm going to go to market and I want to make sure that I can expand my brand globally. Great, do a clearance search, right? Mm-hmm. And then make sure you register your trademark. Right? I'm having all these assets that are created in my business. I want to make sure that I own them. Great. Get a proper agreement in place. Like, it's not rocket science. Mm-hmm. I would love to say it's rocket science. It is not. It is a little dose of education and a little bit of willingness to do some work. And then obviously to bring people to the table to help you with it. But just, you don't have to, you can have a very safe business. You can have a very smart business with just a little bit of education and a little bit of investment from time to time, whether it's with, someone helping you out from a legal perspective, whether it's with a filing fee with a government agency. You do not have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a very safe business. A little bit of education, a little bit of effort, a little bit of investment. You can have a rock solid foundation once you're growing.
Let's say I come to you guys or a similar firm. So how does the onboarding process look like? What are the scope of services I should expect?
That's a good question. Frankly, I think that's a question that you should ask anybody that you're engaging with is, what do you do, right? Yeah. Not all lawyers do everything. I don't do everything. If you came to me and said, hey, can you write my will? I mean, could I? Yes. Would I be a good choice to do that? No, I'd be a horrible choice. I don't, that's not what I practice, right? I think what you should look for, and I think this is true, whether it's with legal, whether it's accountancy, or really it's whatever, is what's your sweet spot? What are you about? What do you do well, right? And why do you do it, right? Like I said, my practice is all about supporting e-commerce sellers, right? I am specific to Amazon just because that's such a huge platform. The issues are the same though, whether you're selling on, your own store, whether you're doing it on eBay. I mean, the platform's kind of agnostic. The legal issues are the same, right? And here's why, here's why I do what I do. I help people protect their personal assets. They're going to need a brand, or they're going to be given a brand through like a licensing agreement. Okay, so how do we make sure that brand is bulletproof? I have a client right now that they're helping a brand that's based in the US expand internationally. And so we're working with them to understand, okay, great. This company has a registered trademark in the United States. What do we need to do to make sure that it's registered and protected in the UK, France, Germany, Spain, Italy? You as the distributor over in Europe, do we have the right agreement in place, right? We don't know anything about this trademark or where it came from. We know it's registered, which is a good thing, but what are your rights to use it? And then what sorts of representations, affirmations do we want from this brand saying, yeah, we did a clearance search and we're we have ownership of it. And if somebody comes after you for using it, like, you're not going to be in hot water, right? Do we have the proper documentation, right? Copyrights, again, making sure that we own those things, right? We generate, I think, a balanced business. I was writing an article for a publication here recently talking about balance in your business. And the person who kind of presented me with the prompt was like, well, you do legal stuff. Like, can you do anything about balance? And I'm like, you better believe I can do something about balance, because what I see in the physical product space is everybody's about product. And everybody ignores asset. We have brands, we have photos, we have sales copy, we have advertising, we have instruction manuals and inserts and graphics. I would submit to you, for every physical product that you launch, you have 5 times as many assets that are associated with it. Yeah. And so the successful business is a balanced business. It's one that sees the forest for the trees. It's one that understands for every physical piece of inventory, there's intellectual pieces that come along with it. They recognize that and they make a framework. They make a strategy for protecting that. Those are the businesses that are successful. Those are the businesses that are doing it well. Those are the businesses that are doing 7-figure exits because they've got all their I's dotted. They've got all their T's crossed. It's not just a list of products. It's not just a good profit and loss statement. There's intangible assets in the business that are locked down and secured. That becomes a really, really sexy offer when people look to sell. And I hate talking about selling because I particularly, I work with all businesses, but I really, really enjoy working with folks who are just starting from zero, right? They are literally, they've got a why. They want to launch a business. Maybe they've launched a business before, maybe they haven't, but like we're starting from the ground up, which is great. And I hesitate talking about the sale because it's so far away. It's way out here, if it even happens at all. There's part of me that if you have a money tree, why would you get rid of it, right? If you have a good, profitable business, you've got systems in place, you've got people to support it, why would you ever get rid of it? You wouldn't, right? But sometimes entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs. They want to go off and do something else, right? So I always want to position people in a way that if they did want to exit because they either want to go off and do something else or they just want to retire. They do, in fact, want to go live on a beach somewhere. I've had people do this. Cool. We can get the most value for what you've built, right? Otherwise, what's the point? And we have to start from day one. And if we have that understanding from day one that let's protect ourselves, that's step number one. We've got a business up and running, a business entity. Great. Now let's talk about brandings and let's talk about all the different names, logos, and slogans. Let's make sure that they're all available, that they function as a trademark. Great. Here's how we protect these. Here's when we protect these. We shouldn't be registering everything day one. It just wouldn't make sense. We never do anything legal in our business to the detriment of us growing the business through products. Yeah. If we don't have money coming in the coffers, we don't have a business. So if you're talking to somebody and they're not really speaking about the type of business that you run, they do, we do business accounting. Yeah, but do you focus on e-commerce providers? Because it's real weird with sales tax and we're selling everywhere, but we're not really selling anywhere. And what do I do with those European sales? Asking good questions about who do you really support? Oh, we do intellectual property. Okay, well, is that biotech? Or is that ecom? Because, it's a different practice if you're working with MIT labs creating biotech things versus me selling a spatula with a brand name on it. For the record, I don't sell spatulas. That's my go-to example because it's such a dumb, boring, basic product. And, and shout out to all the people selling spatulas.
It is very important. For me and my wife these days, we have one of our e-commerce stores, which we started a long time ago. And it's like as you said, it's kind of a money tree, but we would like to get rid of it because we would like to move on. But we did all the mistakes that you mentioned. We no trademark, no nothing. Because when we were beginners, we didn't want to invest.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, what is the threshold? Obviously, you said it's never too early. You should incorporate, at least create a company and have this wall around you before whenever you start. But what is the initial investment of having all of this covered? Not necessarily your cost of services, but what should I expect? Like a ballpark, like $1,000, $10,000?
Honestly, I would never advise that you do it on your own, just because you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to make mistakes. You'll save cost in the short term, but you will incur it in the long term because you won't do something right. So, under $500, you can get a business entity spun up, including filing fee and the like. A couple $100, you should be able to organize a company, get a proper business structure. Trademarks are a little bit more expensive. So the filing fees with the trademark office are about $325 per category. So a couple $100, just literally, if you did it your own, you'd be paying a couple $100. $1,000 or so is you could get a trademark done, in a country. Copyrights, couple $100 per registration, I think is a pretty fair sort of fee. But again, it depends. And so as I think about my own offerings, I don't just file a trademark. So, and again, these are good questions to ask whoever you're kind of talking to and interviewing in terms of, do I want to work with you? Right? Because not everyone's the same. So when I file a trademark, there's a difference between clearing a mark and filing it. and clearing the mark, filing it, and then handling it through the prosecution process, which can be up to 9 months. And there's all sorts of things that can happen in between. I price my fee such that you pay it once, here's the fee, and then I'm going to be with you throughout the duration. We're going to clear it. And if it doesn't clear for whatever reason, I'm going to work with you on a rebrand. And there's no additional fees because I want you to get a brand name. And if it takes 1 time or 2 times, we're going to get you sorted. You're going to get a brand name. Then we will prepare the application. We'll file it. Then we're going to monitor it. And if there's a rejection by the trademark office, we're going to respond to it, right? If there's an opposition that someone opposes you registering, which presumably we'll have known about by doing the clearance to begin with, but someone opposes it, I'm still there with you, right? Like again, thinking about the mind of an entrepreneur, you don't want to be nickeled and dimed to death. And so being very clear to say, here's the fee, and just we're either going to get you registered or we're not. And I'm with you through the process. So long as you want me here, I'm here fighting for you, right? That's how I price things. Other firms, they don't price things that way. And that's okay. Some people just say, hey, well, it's X number of dollars to clear it. It's X number of dollars to prepare it. It's X number of dollars to be able to respond to any rejection. It's X number of dollars if we get an opposition. So I think asking those questions to say, listen, here's the end that I'm looking to achieve. I need this thing registered, right? How much is it going to cost to make that happen? And does that include everything? Or are there certain things that could happen along the way that might incur additional cost around? That's a good question to ask. It's the same thing that you would ask an accountant, same thing that you would ask any sort of business advisor. Just how much, what's my bottom line here? Like, here's where I want to be, right? Understand that there's a lot of variables, but what am I looking at here? And what does this, it's $200? Okay, great. What's in that? Okay, what's not in that? What are the other things that might occur that would be additional monies so that you can at least know? What I would tell you, though, is you kind of talk about your own scenario of, listen, I launched and I didn't do a lot of these things for whatever reason. What do I do now? Because I've got a money tree. I've got a successful business. Can I fix it? Sure you can. Absolutely can. There's no reason why you can't go back, and kind of, fix up the house, get it ready for sale, right? There are trademarks filings that can happen. There are copyright registrations that can happen. None of those are time boxed and time limited. All of those things are, I don't want to say correctable because that sounds like you did something wrong. Could you have done something better? Sure. Right. But every problem is solvable. Brand names don't expire. So long as you're using the brand name, great. You have rights. Now we just need to formalize those. Copyrights. Okay, well, let's make sure that we got those agreements in place so that you actually own the copyright. It might be that we have to go back and get some signatures, but better to know that now than when we're trying to sell it. And then, okay, great. Let's perfect our rights. Let's sell it such that when you sit down to sell your business, you can have a nice profit and loss statement. You have your balance sheet. You have your trademark portfolio. You have your copyright portfolio. Nice. You slide that across the table. That's a really sexy offer. You're going to get more for that than, oh man, I've got, www.isellproducts.com and I've got, 100 SKUs and here's how much I made last year. And like, what do you want to give me for it? Like any investor worth their salt is going to say, well, that's great. That's good on you. Sounds like you made a good first step, but how do you know you own the brand name? And did you, you got tons of product photos. Where'd those come from? And oh, by the way, instruction manuals and inserts, who wrote those? Did you write them? Did your supplier write them? Like, it's just formalizing and locking that down, anticipating those things that are going to be asked before they're asked. That's when you get top dollar for what you've built. Yeah. And again, we all have starter homes that we live in. We start with one house. We make it a little bit better than we found it, right? And certainly when we get it ready for sale, we put a fresh coat of paint. We lay down some new mulch outside. We clean up the hedges. Maybe we add a deck. Right, we're making a little bit of an investment to get the most dollars for when we actually sell the house. It's no different with the business. No difference.
Great metaphor. I like the metaphor of building, redecorating the house. One last question before we wrap things up regarding hiring locally. So would you suggest hiring a lawyer in the region in which the company is formed or where I have the majority of my customers, or someone who knows global stuff? Or how do you suggest, what is the rule of thumb for this?
Yeah, well, with the nature of e-com just being borderless largely, it's not necessary that you hire someone local, meaning in your exact city or even state. What I would be more interested in is do they know the space that I sell in? Do they know e-com? So I know e-com. That's what I do. I practice federal law effectively because we're dealing with intellectual property, which here in the States is registered as at a federal level largely as opposed to a state level. Now, as I represent international clients, if I'm doing an asset purchase sale, if I'm working with, somebody based out of the UK that's buying a business that's based out of Australia, okay, well, I know the legalities of Amazon. I know the legalities of intellectual property, but anybody worth their salt is going to bring in local counsel to assist on local matters. And so, I would be more inclined to not worry in what we do. Right? And that's the big caveat. In what we do, meaning selling online, again, it's borderless largely. Yeah. I would be more inclined to worry about, does the person I'm hiring know the space, right? And do they have access to a network and resources that when they don't, and there's some sort of unique local issue, that they're able to tap into that and bring people to the table to help out. I've been very fortunate, very blessed over the course of years. I do have that network of people that, I have connections with Chinese firms, which are great for handling kind of those strange issues that bubble up with Alibaba suppliers. I have a network inside of Europe that's very helpful in terms of dealing with European issues, folks that I work with in Australia to help with Australian intellectual property issues. And so it's kind of a small community of people who sell online and do online and support online businesses. And certainly any firm, any lawyer, anybody that you work with should have a network that they're able to tap into when they need to.
Well, thank you so much. It was very eye-opening and a lot of valuable content and stuff to think about. Also, for me personally, how can I improve? How can we improve our legal aspects? I want to make maybe a follow-up, if you'll be kind enough to have a follow-up about opportunities in the legal. I mean, you mentioned opportunities, and we didn't cover this at all, and I'm sure it's very interesting. But we'll see in the future. Is there anything that I forgot to ask? Any parting? Last tip, something that
I think the last thing that I would kind of leave folks with is to keep it simple, stupid. The law is a complex thing, or it can be, but your business doesn't have to be, right? If you understand that there are things that need to be sorted and that there are resources out there that can help you get them taken care of, making that investment, taking advantage of those resources, whether it's education, whether it's actual professional services, do that. I think the biggest, kind of miss that folks have when doing online businesses is they just don't take it seriously because they're behind a laptop, they're working on their couch, it's after hours from the real job. And there's this kind of side hustle mentality that kind of finds its way. And I'll take it. It's not just serious yet. I don't really need to do those things. No. If you're serious about your business, take your business seriously early days. Right? You don't have to do all the registrations the first day. You should have a purpose and a plan and a methodology for getting where you need to be, and, so that you're moving forward from a legal perspective. The balanced business, talking about those intangible assets, you should have a plan for how those are going to get protected and when. But it's never going to be to the detriment of putting money in the coffers. It's never going to be the detriment of you actually growing your product catalog and getting more offers to market. Because if you don't have that, you don't have a business. And anybody who's telling you otherwise, that, you need to register this and you need to file this, we need to make sure that this thing is, that person's not giving you good advice. If you don't have a business, none of that matters, right? And so, take your business seriously, do it early days. Don't be fearful of the law. Don't be fearful that I'm going to unintentionally violate something. No, be educated. Go out, get some resources. The guide that, we'll share with all your listeners, we'll talk about kind of the 4 intellectual property types of intellectual property, like we talked about. Read it, take advantage of it, think about how it applies to your business, and then do something with that knowledge. Make sure that you've got that balanced business, that you've got the products, but you've also got the assets, that they're locked down, that you're making good forward progress in your business and you're taking your business seriously.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. So where can people see more about your services? And I know you also have a Facebook group, so can you mention a bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So superherolegal.com is where you can check me out. Certainly you can book a consultation there if you're so inclined. We also have a free guide. It's the 4 types of intellectual property every e-com seller should know about. Again, big educational part of my practice. And so I want to make sure that folks are able to get that. You can download that at the URL. Cool. If you're on Facebook, which is interesting because I only use Facebook kind of for legal purposes. Or business purposes. I don't really use it to hang out with friends, although my clients are friends. So that kind of works. Superhero Legal is the Facebook group. You can jump in. I do weekly streams. I'll do Night Court on Thursday evenings at 9 p.m. where I will talk about a legal topic of my choosing, kind of in a fun, informative way. And then we'll do Last Call at 4 p.m. on Friday. A little bit of motivation, a little bit of business savvy, a little bit of just kind of fun heading into the weekend. I really, again, have a strong education aspect of my practice, certainly services offerings around all the things that we talked about, but then also, a little bit of kick in the butt too about getting out there and building a business, spurring people on, giving them a little bit of motivation. And so we stream twice weekly in the group. There's also, you can always post stuff and ask questions and the like and get those answered and just, hang out with other entrepreneurs, which is great, who are building physical products businesses, which is cool.
Sounds awesome. I'm going to join. I feel awesome. I feel it's a pity I haven't already joined, but now I'm going to join for sure.
Maybe we'll have you on Night Court. You can sit on the witness stand and we'll grill you for a little bit.
Thank you so much, Robert. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you. Be good.
Bye-bye. Hi guys, this is Yaron again. Just a few more things before you take off. Number 1, if you want to learn more about e-commerce and marketing, make sure you check out our YouTube channel, which is called EcomXFactor Official. Number 2, check out our Facebook group, which is called EcomXFactor Marketing and E-commerce Mastermind. This is a great place to ask questions and connect with other business owners. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share it with your friends and colleagues, plus leave a review at your favorite podcast app.